Hello and welcome to Business on the Wire. Even as different industries slowly limp back to life and try to find some kind of normalcy, there's one space that has been hit harder than most and probably has the biggest question mark hanging over its future. At current estimates, people expect that perhaps 4 out of 10 restaurants stand to be shut down in the months to come. How bad is the situation? How much pressure is there on the restaurateurs to actually survive? And what kind of support did they expect from the government and what have they got? Joining me now to talk about all of that is Ritu Dalmia. She's a celebrity chef, she's a restaurateur herself, she's written multiple books on the issue, and she has a deep sense of what's been happening across the restaurant industry, not just in India, but across the world. Thank you, Ritu, for joining in and speaking to us. I think your industry is perhaps, the one that's taken a body blow from this entire pandemic and what's gone down so far. I want to start by asking you whether you've taken that very difficult decision of reopening restaurants or you've decided that at this point it doesn't make sense.
So we decided not to open any of the restaurants. And now we are already on 18th June, 10 days since the decision was made. And if I look back, I think it was really the right decision not to open. Many reasons. When we decided not to open, and there were other restaurateurs who said, oh, we are opening, I had a little tummy ache. Am I doing the wrong thing? And even if it's a few thousand rupees a day. But the thing is, when you open a restaurant for dine-in, that means waiters need to be on the floor, chefs need to be in the kitchen, electricity, water, rent, etc., etc. The law right now in Delhi for dine-in is very simple. No alcohol, no air conditioning, temperature has to be between 24 and 30 degrees, and the worst, 9 o'clock curfew, which means the last diner has to leave the restaurant by 7 p.m. Clean up, and then that's the only way the staff's going to get home by 9. Now, I'm sorry, which Delhi person do you know who goes for dinner at 6 o'clock to leave by 7? And in that crisping heat, who's going to go for lunch without AC? And more than just who's going to go out, the number of Delhi are increasing daily. There's so much fear. I mean, in a way, it's paradox. I was in Delhi for 2 weeks from Goa. I went back thinking I'm going to take charge of my empire before it crumbles down. Well, it's anyway a pile of crumble. That's another story. And what I saw in Delhi was very, very sad. On one hand, you have this great fear and people are not going out. On the other hand, one day I went to do some sabzi shopping in Khan Market and I turned around. I said, I don't want to go there because what had happened was only with the people who had opened their shops and the people who were hanging around, employees and shop owners, were so many people that I said, I don't want to be here. And I just turned around and went to online shopping and ordered whatever groceries I needed there. So you have this extreme recklessness on one hand, numbers increasing on one hand, and then a foolish decision like to open the restaurant without really giving it a thought and the right way to open it. Because what happened? Few restaurants opened on the 8th of June. By 11th, they decided to shut down again. So it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, and when you said restaurants, I think it's really one of the few industries which today I can't even say confidently will ever come back again in near future because it's so bad. It's so bad. I don't know if you know, we have restaurants in Italy as well. And in Italy, I have a lot of support from the government in the sense that the government is paying part of the salaries or they paid part of the salaries whilst the lockdown was going on. They've asked all the landlords to suspend the rents. That means we have to pay, but we can pay, when we are able. There are loans which the government, in spite of that, I'm struggling. In spite of all the support, I'm struggling, but hopefully I may still survive in Italy. And in India, our government has just refused to even look at restaurant as an industry. They've just refused. It's almost like it's for rich people, but that's not reality. Today, I mean, just if you look at NRAI, which is the official and the organized restaurant body, has 50 lakh restaurants. And you can consider there must be at least 50 lakhs which are not part of this organized body. I mean, and most of these people actually hire migrant laborers, because whether they're waiters, whether they are the line cooks, etc. Today, even if I open, I don't even know if my staff's going to come back, you know. So,
in fact, very same NRAI, Ritu has pointed out that at this point, the employee strength stands at 7.3 million jobs that it creates.
thank you.
Give me a sense of what you think we're looking at in terms of job losses, because frankly, even a 10 to 20% loss really means that 15 lakh people stand unemployed.
Yeah, yeah. It's a huge look. Eating out is a very integral part of everyone's life. And when we talk about restaurants or eating out, we talk from a chana bhatura man to a chaatwala to a South Indian idli dosa place to a fancy restaurant. Okay? So restaurants is an integral part of everyone's life, irrespective what category of people or what strata they come from. And what is very sad, as I said, is that the government has absolutely shut their eyes. And I'll be very honest with you today. I mean, I'm a survivor. I'm a phoenix. I tell myself that I'll always rise above everything. But even I'm a bit shaky, because I really don't know if my India business will survive. Maybe 2 months later, you may be having a chat with me. How does it feel that your business is over here? Because I'm doing everything I can, and people have been very supportive. But the way things are, there's no support. Rent, another huge issue which has been here is the rent. Because don't forget, and let's talk only about metros right now, Delhi, Mumbai, the rents in India have always been ridiculously high. And most of the landlords have been very short sighted, unfortunately. They are not only forget about negotiating rent, most of them are not even willing to waive off the rents for the months of the lockdown. Now, you're not going to waive off any rent. You're not going to consider renegotiation of rent in future. I mean, let's say GK1, Connaught Place, Khan Market, where rents are between 7 lakhs to 25 lakh rupees a month. Going forward, less than 40% people coming in. I mean, who can even survive? Who can even survive? So we are also right now in discussion out of the 6 outlets. How many will I keep? How many will I close? The landlords that will support me are the ones that will remain open. The rest, if I don't have a choice, I'll have to shut it down.
There are some figures doing the rounds, Ritu, that estimate that perhaps 4 out of 10 restaurants will close down for good. I mean, do you think it's going to be worse than that?
I think it's going to be more than that, because I'll tell you very simply, they have done a same survey in Italy and in UK. And we're talking about Italy and UK, countries where there has been massive government support for the restaurant industry. There, the figures are looking at 40% closure. Now, here, with zero support whatsoever. I mean, the funniest is when this MSME scheme was organized, that the banks can, you'll get a loan or whatever. So most restaurants fall under MSME. I mean, that was 1 month ago. No banks have any clarification on it. A company like ours, which had 30 crores turnover last year, I'm eligible for 5,40,000 rupees loan. I just told them to shove it up there. I don't need it. Sorry, excuse my French. But in a country where there is no support, you really think it'll be 40%? No, it'll be much higher, because and what's sadder, or what's going to be worse, is most of the restaurants are not owned by chains or have investors or have big monies behind it. Most of the restaurants are opened by people who are passionate about it, who dream about it. Food is it's a very unique business. It's a business where you don't do it, say, okay, this is a P&L. This food is really about your love for food, which reflects in your business. And if you see, most of the restaurants are actually run either by chef or people who love or passionate about. What about them? What about them? How are they going to survive? Because don't forget, as I said, it's a unique industry. Number one, we don't have assets per se. I may have invested 1 crore in a restaurant. If my restaurant shuts down, I will get not even 2 lakh rupees if I'm lucky, because it'll all go in kabadi. Who's going to pay you for used chairs, used tables, used kitchen equipment? they come and take it by kilos, and I am a queen at it because I may have had successful restaurants, but I've also seen many failures in my past. Never like this, that's another story. So there is no asset per se. Secondly, it's not like a car company or a bicycle company that you prepare, you have some stocks, whenever the markets are going to get better, you can sell your stock and recover some money. All the food is perishable. So your product cost is only about 25 to 35%. Your fixed costs, which really makes or breaks a restaurant, is close to 65%. Rent, salaries, license fees, which is ridiculously high, your staff cost, bijli, pani. This is your main cost of a restaurant. With the closure of the restaurant, do these costs go down? No, they don't. You still have to pay the bloody excise. You still have to pay the rent. Salaries we managed to pay so far. Will I be able to pay in future? I don't know. All I know is me, our partners, we have put in our personal funds right now to pay the salary. So at least people can run their homes, because also in our industry, people who we hire are not some fancy CEO type of people. They all are from very lower income group. And if you don't pay them, how will they run their homes? So
So I've been speaking to people from different industries as well, and there is a degree of frustration, perhaps not as dire as this, because the restaurant business is the worst hit. And they made the point saying, "Jo hua so hua. Here's what we can do next." Even at this point, what do you think can be done? Because a couple of things come to mind. For example, why this distinction between restaurants and bars? Why this 9 p.m. curfew, as you pointed out? What do you think could be simple solutions to take even now to help the situation from hemorrhaging the way it is?
So the help from the policy making side or from new ideas. So from policy side, as I said, from policy side, it's very simple. You cannot sell alcohol in a theka, but not allow restaurants to sell it. It doesn't make sense. Okay, that's number one. Number two, you cannot have a curfew on meal times. I would like to ask my policy makers if they will go out for dinner at 6:30. If the minute these two changes, I will still dare to open. Let's say I will dare to open without knowing what the results are. Because don't forget, even after opening, what's going to happen? We are talking about social distancing, which is a norm which has to stay, which means restaurants are going to work at 40% capacity. So even when these policies change, many restaurant owners will be very scared to open unless and until they have struck a deal with their landlords where they can afford to pay the rent. So for me, if I can't afford to pay the rent, and I know I can do full Monty, serve till 11 p.m., serve alcohol, but I know I will be running on 40% capacity. It may still not make sense for me to open, but at least I will start thinking about it. Okay, that's a possibility. A lot of people are talking about deliveries. Okay, delivery being one of, but hang on, guys. I mean, delivery only, there's only so much of business you can do. We have been doing this do-it-yourself kits, which have been, very well received. We are sending, but as I said, the business of do-it-yourself kit delivery cannot go more than 14-15 lakh rupees a month. Okay. Now, restaurant, let's say a 35-seater, 40-seater restaurant of mine would do anywhere between 30 to 35 lakhs a month. Okay. Yeah. If you look at the thing, it still cannot cover the cost. It may oil your machinery, but will it cover your cost? It will not. So, all the people who say delivery is the only way to save the restaurant, I always say, no, it is not. Delivery has to be a separate business model. It cannot run out of a restaurant because you cannot afford to pay those rents, those costs. You have to work it as a separate model. Delivery cannot support a restaurant. A restaurant has to run as a restaurant. Only then can it pay the fixed costs that they have.
The last figure I have, Ritu, is that the industry is looking at losses of around 1 lakh crore through the lockdown. Would you say that's a fair estimate, or it's far worse?
It could go far worse than that. It could go far, far. Look, because when we talk about restaurant hospitality, don't forget there's another industry which is getting very, very badly affected, affiliated with restaurant, caterings.
Correct.
Okay, events and caterings. 50% of my revenue used to come from caterings and events. On my books, as on today, I have 0 bookings till next year. I have 0. Every event I had is cancelled. Will people throw these 1,000 people dinners again? Absolutely not. Are people going to have these mega weddings? Absolutely not. If there'll be a 50 people wedding this year, I'll be lucky. So what do you do? So it's not only there's an income that's losses of restaurant. What about, like I said, the catering is a huge business. It's a 5 billion euro industry just in India. What's going to happen?
Why do you think, Ritu, there's such a difference in the response between what you're seeing in global examples versus what you're seeing over here? Because surely there is a sense of the size of the industry in terms of employability, all of it.
Serves everyone right who voted in this government. Okay? I'll tell you, and I don't care, maybe I'll have suparis after me after this. I was discussing this with a friend just the other day. India and China both have a narcissistic leadership. Okay? The difference is, in China, there's an intelligent narcissist who has a group of advisors who advises him at least in the correct way. Okay, the problem in India is, as I said, if you look at it right from the beginning, it's just been one faux pas after another. First, they forget about the migrant workers altogether. Okay, so this whole chaos that happened, nowhere in the world, Mithali, did people get 4 hours notice for a lockdown. No one got that chance to even prepare themselves. The states, no one. Okay, so that's our biggest problem here. I think our policy makers, our government are right now, they are totally out of their depths. And they have no clue how badly it's going to be hit. On one hand, a few years ago, Mr. Amitabh Kant, who used to be the chairman of Incredible India, he's the man who started the Incredible movement, and now I think he's Niti Aayog. I mean, he should know better than anyone else what tourism, what restaurant, what hospitality brings to this country in terms of income, in terms of jobs, in terms of exposure. And I don't think they have even considered it. I mean, I'm sorry, what chance do we have? What chance do we have when, 5 kilos of dal for a whole family is given for a month as so I'm sorry, I don't want to get too political here, but I'm so disillusioned, I'm so angry, I'm so upset that honestly, at this moment, all I say is that if it doesn't work, maybe this country doesn't deserve me in any case, because it's disheartening. I mean, just yesterday I heard Indian Accent in London closed down, Ledbury closed down, Caprice closed down. Now, a restaurant like Indian Accent, they have made India proud all over the world. They have taken Indian cuisine to another level and given it that respectability that it deserved, rather than just being a curry and vindaloo after a beer. It gave it. Now today, when restaurants like Indian Accents are closing down, I mean, what hope do other people have? And this is what's so very sad. And we have NRAI, various other bodies have made so many requests to the finance minister, to the commerce minister, to at least hear, understand. But when there's a wall in front of you, what are you going to do? And you see, the thing, that's what I'm saying, people in Italy, they realize that. Italy realizes how important hospitality, tourism, etc. is. So like I said, okay, everyone likes to complain. So in spite of all the SOPs given by them, of course, Italians are still complaining, not enough. But I always say, hang on, guys, be grateful. You rather be in a situation where there is no bloody SOPs whatsoever, there's no support. And today I'm very angry for all the bloody taxes I've paid over the years, corporate tax and my personal tax, because this is the time when that tax comes to help me. But it hasn't helped me. Yep. And in Italy, what they've done is very simple. This is the taxes we have collected. This is the time to give back.
There's a sense, Ritu, that much of this problem is, of course, due to COVID, but the problem actually started quite a while back. I mean, the sector has
I
been
was
struggling.
that.
GST has almost broken the back of the entire system. Do you think that it's been a long running problem
Correct.
that just got unaddressed and now has almost reached
Correct.
this cataclysmic
Correct.
close?
So you see, COVID, I don't think is a reason. COVID is actually in some ways been a blessing in disguise because COVID is now a subject you can blame everything for. Okay, everything is because of the problem actually started at least for restaurant industry from demonetization time. Okay, that was the first biggest problem that happened. Now, where do people spend whatever disposable cash income, whatever they do? Okay, I'm not talking about black money or white money, let's not even go there. But demonetization in reality really hit the restaurant business, hospitality business. Okay, spending became much lesser. That was problem number one. Problem number two was the GST, of course. So, and in restaurants, it's a unique case. Restaurants have a completely unique GST system, which no other industry has in India, which is so funny. So when you come to a restaurant, you will get a bill with 5% GST on it, and you're so happy. Oh, the GST from 18% has reduced to 5%. Now these guys also must be making money. I have to deposit that entire 5%. Okay, I'm paying 18% on all my produce, on all my purchase. I'm paying 18% on my rent. I'm paying 18% of services. So what has happened? Every cost of mine has gone up by 18% because I am not getting any credit for the VAT I'm collecting from you. Can I go and tell my clients that my rent today, instead of 6 lakh rupees, costing me 7 lakh 20,000 rupees? Can I go and tell my client the mozzarella that I was buying today at 300 is costing me 370? So I have to, because no restaurant can dare to increase the prices 18 to 25% jump. They can't do it because customers. So actually this rot has been coming in for a long time, right from demonetization, and COVID was really the final nail in the coffin. That was it. But this is something, again, as I said, we have addressed it. NRAI has tried, everyone on their personal pull lagate hain, that guy comes to my restaurant, array, this one knows that one. It's not that everyone has tried, but it's almost like I don't want to recognize you guys. I don't want to talk about you guys. I don't want to think about you guys because I don't have the bandwidth, I don't have the brain space, and I don't have the. So what the hell are you going to do? What the hell are you going to do? I mean, I used to be listening to every 5 day, Nirmala ji made 5, I think, announcements. So every day, the only time I watched TV with such fervor was, okay, next maybe something may come for restaurant. Okay, oh, not today, maybe tomorrow. And then I said, not gonna happen. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, Ritu, that you've been like a phoenix and you've had such a long and exemplary career in the world of food and the restaurant business. Is this your lowest point?
It is. I've never seen anything like this in my life, Metali. I opened my first restaurant when I was 21. Didn't work, had to sell it. Okay. I opened a restaurant in London where for 2 years someone would put a gun on my head and I would sign a check to the supplier, knowing it would bounce back like a rubber band. Okay, I've had many successful restaurants. I've nearly gone bankrupt once when in 2002, after Diva opened, I opened a food. But every time there was hope. Every time there was this thing that I can come out of it again. And I've always, but today I have to admit, I don't want to sound fatalistic. I don't want to sound like, how shall I say, a naysayer, but I'm in complete conundrum here. It's something I have never, it's bizarre. And it's not only me, like I said, even with people who are much bigger in bigger industries than me, people who are older than me, people who have had longer careers than me. When I speak to them, and I don't think anyone in this industry has ever. Food was always associated with fun, with happiness, with people, with family. It's always been a sign of joy. It has always represented some form of bonding, whether it's a girls' night out, whether it's, you know, a romantic dinner, whether it's a birthday. And to think of a world where these restaurants will not even get a chance to survive is so bloody sad. It's so sad.
I feel your pain, Ritu, and I hope that the people who need to listen are listening at this point.
You know, today I will still maybe survive. I'm not so sure, because as I said, I've risked all my personal funds in it. Our partners have put in. So we are still trying to see if by till end of the year, hopefully we'll manage, and if no one can continue. But what's really sad are people who have put their entire life savings into their one little restaurant, which will not survive because of this, is what's really painful and hurtful.
It truly is. And I think as a society, we will feel the ramifications of this in the months to come.
So imagine a birthday if you have to cook yourself and clean the dishes after that. Okay, and then sit and say, oh my God, I'm so tired. Can you imagine that's what your life's going to be?
Not fun at all. Not fun at all. But if I want to take a little bit of a left turn, this is a very special month because it's Pride Month.
Yes.
And I think it's been overwhelming because of the kind of voices we've heard this month for different reasons as well, but they've all sort of come together. Of course, it's taken a pivot and gone online, but do you think it's still been as strong and as forceful as it has been in the past? Are you feeling it?
And stronger. And stronger. Stronger. You know, it's very funny. I love my restaurants, you know that. I really feel for it. But if I was to say one thing that I'm proudest in my life is about being part of the 377 petition, which got 377 decriminalized 2 years ago. This for me is my happiest and the proudest moment. So this is the first time, 2018, September 6th was when the law was decriminalized. I think 2019, people were still getting around it, and 2020 Pride. I mean, I have never seen so much open voices, so many things happening around it, that at least some good. I can see a little rainbow there amongst all the darkness of COVID.
It is a bright, bright rainbow indeed, yes. Ritu, and people like you and Menika and Arundhati are really, you know, stars for
stars. They are rock stars.
There's going to be a lot, yeah.
And people like Wire and organizations like Wire. I mean, you guys also make it possible, and I'm really, one of the few things I read are the articles of Wire, and I think you guys are doing such an outstanding job. Hats off to you.
Thank you, Ritu, and you're going to have a lot of fans watching, so I'm going to make a special request, which is that why don't you cook up a little something for us and really make our day.
Recreate what I did when nothing was available. Easy, simple, super, and in few minutes. And even if you don't like it, whoever's watching it and cooking it, they have to make the right sounds and say what an amazing dish it was. Okay, done deal. Done deal.
Fantastic. Can't wait to watch it. Can't wait.
Super.
Hello everyone, I'm really delighted to make something really simple but something very comforting which we all need in these strange days. In Goa, I have managed to find some very, very thin stalked asparagus. They're almost like green beans, delicious. They're called asparagus, but I'm not so sure if they are real asparagus. I have some leftover spring onion, not in its best shape, and that's what's so amazing about soup. Any vegetable which is on its last days, that's the one that goes into soup. Some onion, and I'm going to just saute it some olive oil, add some water, let it cook for a while, and later add just some coconut milk to give it that little oomph factor. Enjoy it. Okay. If you notice, I always like to add the onions in cold oil. Simple reason, otherwise the onion gets too brown from outside and doesn't cook well enough from inside. So you see what happens is when you add the onion in cold oil, the onion cooks evenly and properly. It doesn't get too brown and raw from inside. It cooks as the oil gets heated up. And since I want to give it a slight Asian touch, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a little bit of ginger garlic paste. And some water. And let it cook now for a good 20-25 minutes on low heat. So it's nicely cooked. It's nice and frothy. I don't like my soups too thick, so if you see the water content is little, I'm going to just let it cool it off and blend it. And what's nice about the soup is you can have it both cold as well as hot. So it really depends what you're really in a mood of. As you can see, it's very nicely just pureed, and what I'm going to do is just reheat it with a little bit of coconut milk, salt and black pepper. So it's nicely warmed, and what I have here is some freshly made coconut milk. What I've done is basically dab nariyal pani with its chitki, just blend it together and you have some fresh coconut milk. In case you don't have nariyal pani, just use a canned or Tetra Pak coconut milk. You see, normally in asparagus soup or cream of asparagus asks for cream, butter, but this is really a very tasty and a light soup because it uses coconut milk. As you saw before, I used olive oil, and last but not the least, the ginger will just give it an extra oomph factor. And all you do is serve it. With a little drizzle of olive oil, and if you want, you could add some gajia crumbles to it. Enjoy it.
Thank you, Ritu. That was fantastic. Thank you for cooking for us. I'm sure there's a lot of fans out there who are going to try that recipe. And of course, we are super proud of you for everything that you've done, both for the LGBTQ community and of course for making us proud about Indian food and Indian cuisine. I appreciate your very, very candid thoughts today. Thank you for joining in.